This podcast is brought to you by the School of Advanced Study, University of London. All of our podcasts are available from our website, www.sas.ac.uk.
I'd like to introduce Monica Jansen, who is from Antwerp and Utrecht, who will talk to us about the featured text that we're going we all have looked at today. And her title is Precarity and the Reinvention of Motherhood, a reading of Tempo Parziale by Carmen Covito. Thank you, Monica. 20 minutes, no more, please.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me here. And I will start immediately. In this paper I will try to connect the aims formulated for this workshop and Caroline Guttrell's article Managing the Maternal Body with Carmen Covito's short story Tempo Parziale that has been translated into English for this occasion by Adalgisa Giorgio and Jill Rye. And I will also add some connections to Miller's article, or I will try. I read it yesterday and I added some points. The title zooms directly, the title of the story zooms directly into one of the main problems for women in Italy who wish to combine employment and motherhood, the lack of part-time jobs. Compared to other countries in Europe, women's employment rate in Italy is very low, as has already been said. Covito's story was published for the first time in 2007 and for the second time in 2009. So the time period considered here coincides with the short story's context. In 2007, the employment rate of women between 15 and 64 years of age was nearly the lowest of Europe. Italy came 27th, followed only by Malta, with 46% of women employed, compared with a European average of 55%. This means that less than 1 in 2 women has a job in Italy, while nearly 70% of the labor force is male. Some factors that could explain this difference, according to economist Caroline Savi, are to be found in the North-South divide in Italy and in a generational difference which saw in 2007 a low employment rate for Italian women between the age of 55 and 64. Only 23% compared to an average European rate between 36 and 50%. And this delay in respect to the Lisbon strategy of 2010, which strives to reach full employment with 60% of women and 70% of men, could be due to the fact that women's education in Italy reached an equality level only in the 1960s. Women in Italy are not only underrepresented on the labor market, the introduction of flexibilization of temporary contracts only worsened the scenario for their work stability. The number of women employed in part-time jobs in recent years has increased enormously. According to Istat statistics, in 1993, 93,000 women in Italy had a part-time job, and in 2005 already 1,906,000. For male occupation, the increase is from 338,000 in 1993 to 461,000 in 2005. To have a part-time job can of course be the result of a free choice, especially when women have children to take care of, but the precarization of working conditions has also shown an augment of involuntary part-time employment. So-called atypical contracts seem to damage women's career perspectives because they risk staying trapped in a kind of stable precarity. From a feminist perspective, this condition of increased precarity, which has affected women in Italy between 2001 and 2006, should become a core issue for female resistance in the new millennium. To quote from a collective chapter, Feminist Activism and Practice, Asserting Autonomy and Resisting Precarity, in the volume Resisting the Tide, Cultures of Opposition under Berlusconi, I quote, Low 30, that was introduced in 2003, had a particularly gendered impact. It aimed to improve flexibility in working conditions, creating new posts and lowering unemployment, opening up opportunities, especially for women, younger people, and those seeking to return to work. However, research has shown that it has instead increased precarity for atypical workers, including a large number of women. Family commitments mean that women often work part-time. The new flexible system has seen women working longer hours for lower pay, with little right to complain and extremely uncertain future prospects. Indeed, an increase in precarity has been recognized as a widespread phenomenon in Italy, creating a cohort of precarious subjects. End of quotation. This is more or less the social and economic context in which to situate Covito's story Part-Time, a title that in this light seems not to be neutral but could be part of a women's right to work campaign. Some feminist groups which resist through precarity recommend the use of irony in order to lift women from their passive position of victim and empower them with a performative and transformative role, as becomes manifest in the following statement, I quote, "Our strategies of resistance are peppered with irony, with spiritual optimism as opposed to an intellectual pessimism. Rejecting the sense of precarity as pure victimhood and suffering, we try to transform the limitations derived from our generational situation and gender agency." End of quote. In other words, if resisting precarity can be achieved through pointing out its ambivalent nature, tempo parziale, with its semantic ambivalence, expresses precisely the divide between work and motherhood that a part-time employment should bridge instead of widening. A student from our department for her master's degree in intercultural communication did a comparative research on female precarity in Italy and in the Netherlands. Statistically, in 2008, 75% of working women in the Netherlands were employed in part-time jobs. This is experienced by these women not as the result of precarity, but as a free choice opportunity which enables them to be workers and mothers at the same time. The word precarity isn't even current in the Dutch language except in extreme leftist circles. This clearly shows that precarity is not only a question of numbers but also a question of perception. The literary context in which to situate the short story is, in its most narrow sense, the collection in which it appeared, Lavoro da morire, racconti di un'Italia sfruttata, I work until I die, stories of an exploited Italy, which unites stories originally written for an INAIL campaign, and INAIL is the National Institute for Insurance Against Labor Accidents. And this campaign was against discrimination and disrespect of labor rights in order to reinstall labor ethics. Editor Viviani Rosi has privileged real-life stories of which the invited authors have made their own versions, more or less in accordance with the editor's definition of non-fiction novel, that is, narrated reportage or testimonies which represent the world as one that can be changed, following the Brecht's epigraph chosen for the volume. In a broader sense, the choice for real stories fits in a literary turn from postmodernism towards realism, which according to some could be determined as late postmodern. Vazens and Van Dijk, in their edited volume Reconsidering the Postmodern, observe how in the contemporary novel a search for confirmation about the function of literature is plain to see. It is a search which can explain why so many authors in their critical reaction to postmodernism end up with exactly those literary values dismissed by postmodernism: sincerity, authenticity, truth. This rediscovery of humanistic values, which go against the grain of postmodernism relativism, can however only be convincing when highlighting, with the help of meta-narrative strategies and connotative features, a reality that is authenticated by and through fiction. The dominant condition of female precarity on the Italian labor market explains the surprise expressed by the female protagonist of Covito's story when she is offered a job which is not only full-time but also permanent. I quote, "They hired me, imagine an open contract, good salary, and the work itself wasn't at all bad." End of quote. The setting is probably somewhere in northern Italy, where small enterprises are the dominant industrial feature. As has been said, the situation of female occupation is worse in southern Italy. I will not go into that. Here, a personal account of this Questione Meridionale by Adalgisa Giorgio can be found in a special issue of the online journal La Libellula. The female character underlines that motherhood for her is part of a project which has to be planned carefully in order to avoid conflicts with a career perspective, hers but her husband's as well. The couple gets twins, as can happen when pregnancy is postponed. It is well known that birth rates in Italy are extremely low, as already has been said, and these are influenced negatively by the social vulnerability of women, which find themselves in unstable positions without a long-term perspective and with the difficulty to become economically independent from the family of origin. Between 2006 and 2008, in different media, Italian women in their 30s and 40s gave voice to their desperation. Unable to reconcile motherhood and work, it is not so much working women that make the birth rate diminish, but rather the absence of work or of stable and well-paid jobs. They see themselves doomed to give up their life choice and thus their right to self-determination. Writer Aldo Nove in 2006 publishes a book with interviews which is emblematically entitled "My name is Roberta, I am 40 years old, I earn €250 each month." The Roberta of the title has one of the most tragic stories to tell, not only about herself who has to relinquish her child wish because of her insecure income, but also about her friends who have children but who feel themselves unable to be good mothers. In April 2008, public opinion was shocked by the open letter to President Napolitano written by Sandra, a 30-year-old woman who said abortion for her to be the only outcome because her precariousness did not permit her to take care of a child. With emphatic tone, she throws her sorrow and frustration towards Napolitano, who promises to engage right away in creating better conditions to reconcile family life and work. The story's opening thus immediately evokes the bottleneck of mothering at work in Italy. But these givens could also be related to the international problem of pregnant women in managerial roles, which is analyzed with the help of a transdisciplinary approach in Guttrell's article. Quoting Edwards, it is stated that employers' imperatives regarding efficiency, productivity and cost collide with employers' beliefs about the effects of pregnancy on a worker's ability and willingness to fulfill her work obligations. Planning birth in function of the employer's production schedule is believed by the female protagonists of Covito's story to be an effective method to counter these beliefs, and she seems to have succeeded because she is hired for the job. If workers' behavior and employers' response in the story correspond on this point with Gatrell's analysis, what strikes is the absence of any kind of solidarity in a working environment which is female-dominated. In Gatrell's article, it is suggested that female dominance in the workplace could favor well-being in pregnancy. This is not the case in Covito's short story. The team the female protagonists worked with before her pregnancy is another one than after her return. But it remains female-dominated. The employees seem, however, hierarchically bound to their superiors and are afraid to endanger their productivity rate. This fear is in consonance with Gatrell's article, where it is said that employed pregnant women are perceived by others to be less competent than non-pregnant women, and that new mothers fare little better than pregnant employees, especially if they work part-time. What we see happen here is how feminization of work turns against the women that are employed. The feminization of labor is a process described by Cristina Morini as the adoption on the post-Fordist work floor of strategies of female subordination, which are now extended to men as well, and this puts women in a situation of double exploitation if they are unable to use their knowledge of subordination and exploitation in order to make a difference. What happens is that the reduction of work security puts the worker, female as well as male, in a position of total dependence. Fidelity, participation, limitless time are required without the assurance of some kind of an agreement, even if between unequal partners. With a positive term, the feminization of work should help to realize womenomics, a success formula that combines economic growth with women, work, economy, and fecundity. The right of self-determination and of choosing one's own job is, however, still left to be realized within capitalist biopolitics, a problem to which Morini offers the option of a general basic income. Getting back to our story, the main character decides to resist unfair treatment, but her resistance does not seem to be the result of a free choice. When other young mothers in the same company dare to ask for a part-time, she is marked as a bad example to follow. The woman says in her account, "But these women have resigned themselves, perhaps because they have an alternative. Maybe they have a grandfather who picks up the children at 5 p.m. Me instead, I didn't surrender because I had nothing to lose. For me the only alternative was to resign, and I soldiered on like a real tough cookie." In her case, the family support network does not work, and neither can she co-opt her husband. I quote, "And my husband, the poor devil, would like to help, but he goes out at 7 a.m. and when he comes back at night he's so tired that he hardly has the strength even to prise his mobile from his ear." And so, organization, and more organization. Here another weak point of Italy's social system comes to the fore. Government's financial aid to families is below the European standard, as already has been said. Compared to France's 12%, Italy spends only 4% of the budget for family politics. A problem linked to this is the childcare structures that are insufficient. In 2004 only 11%, but according to the Lisbon strategy this should be 33% in 2010. The narrator tells her story for the umpteenth time. A comic effect is generated in the story by the twins' comments on how their mother tells and retells it. And this signals the presence of a trauma which probably will get the status of an open wound, like so many unresolved tragedies in contemporary Italy, if not dealt with on a collective and institutional level. The mother in the story resists her exclusion from the work floor. She is offered to take her redundancy pay and go home. by getting the help of the equality advisor, who is introduced in the story as a kind of good fairy or deus ex machina. I quote, and at this point, bam, shabam, kerplunk, oh, what is it, it's a bird, it's a plane. No, it's the equality advisor. This one meets with human resources, and everything is fixed in 5 minutes. This intervention from outside provokes another set of questions. Why resort to the equality advisor and not to some workers' representative within the multinational, or to a union perhaps? The ironic tone of this magic solution points, in my view, to a void in the arena of social factors in Italy. Resistance, in order to be effective, should be put forward by a grassroots community, as is shown by contemporary reflections on social movements. Feminist groups invest in putting relationships at the center of one's actions. The continuum of individual-collective has of course been marked by the increased gendered precarity of life, work and self-determination, which have emerged as a vital central issue for Italian feminists. End of quote. But, as we have seen, the female workers in this story identify with the corporation and not with each other. What's more, the lack of interpersonal solidarity points towards a phenomenon in which different Berlusconi governments have excelled: the appointment of remarkable women as Minister for Equal Opportunities. In Berlusconi 3, this was Stefania Prestigiacomo, and in Berlusconi 4, it was Mara Carfagna, an ex-model. These women, according to some, have become post-feminist role models with ways of their own to emancipate from precarity. According to others, they signal the dissolution of the sense of a clearly defined shared us, affirmed during the 1970s against institutions of power. Although, I'm nearly finished. Although the main character gets the part-time job she wanted, she is not the real tough cookie she thought to be, and she is unable to resist the hostile climate against her. She has become, in Garrett's terms, an abjured maternal body, and she is tortured by guilt, not only towards her employer, but also towards her children. And according to Miller, women describe decisions to return to work in narratives which convey a sense of guilt. Their desire to work runs counter to ideals of selfless, intensive motherhood. In the end, she decides to resign, and at first this seems to be the first free choice she makes, and could be viewed as a choice to assert autonomy in feminist terms. But the final lines of the story make clear that maybe this is not a personal victory, but rather a defeat. I quote, "Happy I am. Yes, your super mom is really happy, because we super moms are strong, we are winners. No, it's nothing, just something in my eye. Come on, Serena, run, close the window. The dust is coming in. Katja, help your sister. Don't look at me. Take no notice of me. I'm just a bit tired. It'll pass." What to conclude from this final tragic note, and to whom does the woman deliver her life story? To some servant of commodity culture whose aim it is to transform her story of victimhood in mass entertainment? Or to her daughters whose childhood is marked by their mother's tragedy? Will they reject her resistance, or will they themselves become resistant thanks to their mother's experience? Or does this woman tell her story to writer Carmen Covito, who with her specific wording turns it into a possible world that can be changed? And this brings us to the question of how real life and literature relate to each other, and how literary text can shape the debate on mothering and work. Now I come to my conclusion. A great absence in this story is the protagonist's husband, who seems to play no role whatsoever in his wife's work and life condition. In order to reach employment equality in Italy, also on this side, a dialogue has to be opened to turn the challenge of motherhood and fatherhood and work a feasible one. Of course, domestic workers can supply the need for care, and this creates other job opportunities as well as new paradoxical forms of inequality, as has been shown by Cristina Morini in La Serva Serve, The Servant Serves. It should be noted that all women in Covito's story of precarity are Italian, and there are also, like the women, the interviewed women in Miller's survey, white, heterosexual, and predominantly middle class. So they are part of this group of women. But precarity affects migrant workers as well. But this would be yet another story.
Thank you so much, Monica.